I was 9 when this happened. My sister, my dad, my stepmom, and I were at a place called Palmetto Island. It was a camping resort where you just pull up with a tent or camper and just stay there for a weekend or so. For this trip, we were in a camper. Before I get into the actual story, I should set the scene. Palmetto Island wasn't really an island in the traditional sense. It was completely surrounded by palm trees and vegetation except for the road in and out. There were roads in the resort, but they were only for golf carts and other smaller vehicles. The whole place was also dense with palm trees and vegetation. If you weren't on the road, in a campsite, or at one of the recreational areas, you would be in a forest. Now, for the actual story. We, my family, were all hanging at one of the playgrounds. I had made a new friend while I was playing there. At some point, the rest of my family had left me to play with this new friend, until eventually, he had to leave as well. I was there alone, and the sun was beginning to set. This wasn't the first time we'd been to Palmetto Island, and I had, at the time, known the area pretty well. I had assumed that the walk back to our campground would be short. However, at some point, I had gotten turned around and ended up at the area where you would launch boats into the water to go fishing. There was a group of people there, and I asked them for directions. Now, I wasn't completely brain dead, so I lied and said the number of our campsite was about 10 sites down from our actual campsite. They pointed me in the right direction, and I started walking. I should also note that my family had realized I was no longer at the playground and started driving around in our golf cart, plus another one they had rented. Of course, I didn't know that at the time. If they hadn't realized that, I probably wouldn't be telling this story. So, as I'm walking toward our campsite, a car pulls up beside me, and one of the people I had asked for directions rolls down the window. Keep in mind, I had been walking for about an hour or two in total. He offers me a ride and tells me to ride in the front seat. Me, tired and weary from walking, accepts and gets in the car. I know now that this is something you should never do. We're driving in the right direction until he passes up the entrance to the campsites, at which point I know something is wrong. I tell him he passed the entrance, but he doesn't respond. However, by some stroke of divine luck, I see my dad in a golf cart driving towards the direction we were coming from, so I start yelling and waving at him. I don't know how he noticed me, but he manages to pull up in front of the car and stops, forcing the driver in my car to stop as well. I manually unlocked the car door and ran to my dad, who has his concealed carry drawn on the guy as soon as I'm out of the way. He calls the police and holds the guy at gunpoint until they get there and ultimately arrest him. I'm only now telling this story because I found out last week that guy and his whole family had done this before and actually had gotten away with it. I try not to think about what would have happened to me had my dad not shown up when he did. Creepy family that tried to kidnap me? Let's not meet. I am posting here because I am in need of some advice. Recently, I went on a camping trip to a secluded campground in the middle of nowhere. I was excited for the adventure, but what I experienced there has left me feeling confused and unsure of what to do next. When I arrived at the campground, I was surprised to find that I was the only one there. I had expected to see other campers, but there was not a soul in sight. It was May, and right in the middle of peak season for the park. Despite this, I was thankful to have the privacy, and I shrugged it off and set up my tent. eager to start exploring. As I hiked through the woods, I stumbled upon a strange box that was locked to a tree. It was made of old, weathered wood, and had strange symbols etched into it. I tried to open it, but it was sealed tight. I couldn't shake off the feeling that there was something sinister about it. I felt something calling me to open it, something dark and dangerous. After returning to my camp and making some dinner, I decided to go check out the lake by my campground and watch the sunset. When I got there, I noticed the water level had dropped significantly, and the shoreline was now much further out than before. The water was murky, and the smell of rotting vegetation filled the air. As the sun began to set, I thought I caught a glimpse of something in the water. At first, I thought it was a piece of rotted wood that was exposed by the receding lake level. But the more I looked at it, I kept thinking it looked like some kind of deformed creature. It was far enough that I had to squint to see it, and when the wind blew, I swear I saw it reach out, as if it was beckoning to me. But without my glasses, I couldn't be sure. I felt a sense of confusion and uncertainty. The sun set and I returned to my campsite, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was being watched. At this point, I still hadn't seen a single person since I arrived earlier in the day. My campfire burned low, and I was too scared to go into the woods looking for more wood, so I crawled into the safety of my tent. I tried to sleep, but I kept tossing and turning, my mind racing with thoughts of the strange box and the possible creature in the lake. The darkness of the night seemed to be closing in on me, making me feel trapped and suffocated. The next morning, I quickly packed up my things and headed back home. But I couldn't shake off the feeling that I had missed something important. About a half hour into my drive home, it hit me that in my haste to pack up, I had forgotten my favorite Zippo on the picnic table at my campsite. After a little debating, I decided to go back to the campground to quickly grab my lighter. When I arrived, I found that the campground was now bustling with activity. There were other campers, rangers, and even a small store I hadn't seen before. There was no way I was in the same place. The store was almost an eye shot of my camping site. There were tents pitched on either side of the site I was at. I figured I must have come back a different way and ended up in a different part of the park. That would explain the store and the people. But as I was turning away, the light glistened off something on the picnic table. My stomach knotted up as I realized it was my lighter. There was no doubt that this was the exact spot I had been. I walked up to one of the rangers and asked if they knew anything about all the people and when they arrived. The ranger looked at me with a confused expression and said, "What are you talking about? Most of these people have been here since yesterday." His eyes shifted, and he walked away and got into his truck and drove off. I really got the sense that he was lying to me. I grabbed my lighter and hopped back into my car and sped back to my house. I'm now back home, but I can't shake off the feeling that something is really wrong at that campsite. I don't know if I saw a creature or if it was just my imagination. Why was that creepy box locked to a tree in the woods? And does it have anything to do with this? I feel like I'm losing my mind. I need some advice on how to cope with this and how to figure out what really happened.